I arrived at my mother's retirement party expecting a quiet celebration, only to realize my absence had already been planned. My sister tried to rewrite history by erasing me completely. She believed silence would protect her version of the truth. What she did not expect was that truth always finds its way into the room. My name is Monica, and the first sign that I was never meant to fully exist inside my mother's retirement celebration came long before I stepped through the decorated entrance, because the absence had already been carefully prepared in silence. When the invitation arrived weeks earlier, it felt strangely impersonal, printed without warmth, without detail, without any acknowledgement that I had been part of my mother's working life for as long as I could remember. "Did you help plan this?" I asked my sister over the phone, my voice casual even though my chest already felt tight. "There was nothing to plan," she replied quickly. "It is just a small event." "That seems unlikely," I said. "Mom worked there for decades." "She wanted it simple," my sister said. "Do not overthink it." I arrived at the venue early, holding a small gift I had chosen carefully, expecting to help my mother the way I always had, but the moment I walked inside, confusion settled over me like a heavy coat. "Name?" the attendant asked, scanning a printed list. "Monica," I replied. She frowned slightly, scrolling again. "I do not see you assigned to a table." I forced a polite smile. "That must be a mistake." Behind me, relatives greeted each other loudly, hugging, laughing, calling out names that were clearly expected to be there. When I finally found my mother near the stage, her smile flickered with surprise instead of comfort. "Oh," she said softly. "You came early. I thought you might need help," I replied. She glanced toward my sister, who was arranging flowers nearby, her posture stiffening when our eyes met. "We have everything handled," my sister said quickly. "You can just enjoy yourself." Enjoy myself. The word felt foreign in my mouth as I looked around the room and noticed something else missing. There were framed photographs of my mother's career, speeches printed on the tables, thank you cards acknowledging co-workers, friends, mentors, but nothing that reflected the countless evenings I had spent supporting her through exhaustion, stress, and doubt. An aunt leaned toward me and whispered, "I did not know where you were sitting." "I am still figuring that out," I replied. She hesitated. "I assumed you were part of the program." "So did I said quietly. As guests settled into their seats, I stood near the back, feeling suddenly conspicuous in my uncertainty, listening as my sister moved confidently through the room, greeting people, directing staff, controlling the narrative with practiced ease. When the first speech began, my sister took the microphone. "Our mother dedicated her life to her career," she said proudly. "She balanced everything with strength and independence." I waited for something familiar, something personal, something honest. Nothing came. As applause filled the room, memories surfaced without effort. I remembered late nights when my mother came home drained, sitting silently at the kitchen table while I reheated dinner. I remembered canceling my own plans to help her prepare presentations, manage paperwork, calm anxieties she never showed publicly. I remembered being told, "You understand, Monica. You always do." That understanding had quietly become expectation. A cousin approached me during a pause between speeches. "I thought you would be up there with her," she said gently. "So did I replied. When I finally confronted my sister near the refreshment table, my voice shook despite my effort to stay composed. "Why was I not included?" I asked. She sighed. "This was not about you. It was about our mother," I replied. "And I was part of her life." "You always make things personal," she said. "You should be grateful you were invited at all." The words struck deeper than anger. "I did not need an invitation to belong," I said quietly. She turned away, conversation over. As the event continued, I felt myself shrinking, not physically, but emotionally, as if each unacknowledged contribution were being erased in real time. When my mother finally spoke, thanking co-workers and friends, her voice trembled slightly, and for a brief moment, her eyes searched the room until they landed on me. She hesitated. Then she continued without saying my name. Applause followed. I stood alone, holding my gift, feeling something inside me fracture with clarity rather than pain. This was not oversight. This was design. As the crowd dispersed, laughter filling spaces where my presence had never been intended, I stepped outside, breathing in the cool air, grounding myself in reality. Someone had tried to rewrite my role, to quietly remove me from the story that shaped my own life. Standing there, watching guests leave with smiles and photographs, I understood something devastating and undeniable. I had not been forgotten. I had been erased. And that realization marked the moment I stopped questioning my worth and started questioning who benefited from my silence. I confronted my sister in the narrow hallway beside the banquet room, because the weight of what she had done was pressing against my chest too tightly to remain silent any longer. "Why did you leave me out?" I asked, my voice low but unsteady, every word carrying years of swallowed resentment. She did not look surprised, which hurt more than anger ever could. "You are making a scene," she replied calmly. "This day is not about you. It is about our mother," I said. "And I have been part of her life in ways you never acknowledged." She crossed her arms. "You were always around, yes, but that does not mean you needed to be highlighted." "Highlighted?" I repeated. "I was erased." She sighed as if explaining something obvious to a child. "You chose to stay quiet for years. That is not my responsibility." "I stayed quiet to keep peace," I replied. "You used that silence to rewrite me." She shook her head. "You are being dramatic." The word landed heavily, familiar and practiced, used every time my emotions threatened the comfort she had built around herself. "You barely came to events," she continued. "People assume distance means disengagement." "I showed up when it mattered," I said. "Just not loudly." "That is exactly the problem," she replied. "Nobody notices quiet support." "That does not make it worthless," I said. She stepped past me, conversation closed in her mind. When I returned to the table, my parents avoided my eyes with uncomfortable precision, as if acknowledging my pain might require them to admit complicity. Later, I approached my mother carefully, choosing my words the way I always had. "Did you know I was not included?" I asked. She hesitated, fingers tightening around her glass. "I assumed your sister handled everything fairly." "Did you ask?" I pressed. She looked down. "I did not want conflict. So you let me disappear instead," I said quietly. My father cleared his throat. "This is not the time." "It was never the time," I replied. "That is how this keeps happening." As the evening continued, I felt myself unravel internally, smiling automatically while my thoughts spiraled into questions that refused to stay buried. Was I ever visible? Did my sacrifices matter? Did staying loyal cost me my own story? A family friend, Linda, approached me near the dessert table, her expression warm but uncertain. "I wanted to say," she began, "your mother always spoke about how much you helped her." My throat tightened. "She did." "Yes," Linda said. "She mentioned how you stayed late with her when work overwhelmed her." "Then why was I not acknowledged?" I asked. Linda frowned. "I thought that was intentional." The word intentional echoed painfully. Later, I spoke with Mark, a former co-worker of my mother, who smiled kindly when he recognized me. "You look familiar," he said. "You used to help her prepare reports, right?" "Yes," I replied. "She could not have managed some deadlines without you," he said. She said that often. Hearing validation from strangers cracked something open inside me, because it confirmed what my family had denied. That night, after the celebration ended, I sat alone in my car, gripping the steering wheel as tears blurred the lights outside. I whispered to myself, "They let someone else define me." At home, the silence felt louder than the event itself, and I replayed conversations from the past with painful clarity. "Do not worry, Monica, you are strong. You do not need recognition. You understand, right?" Understanding had become my cage. I realized that by never demanding space, I had allowed others to decide how small I was allowed to be. When my sister texted me later, "You overreacted tonight," I did not respond. For the first time, I noticed something shift beneath the hurt, something unfamiliar but grounding. Awareness. I understood then that my loyalty had not protected me. It had made me convenient. And as devastating as that realization felt, it carried a strange clarity that steadied my breathing. The problem was never my value. The problem was that my silence made it easy for someone else to tell my story without me. Sitting there, emotionally exhausted yet finally honest with myself, I knew I could no longer afford to disappear politely. Being rewritten hurt deeply, but recognizing it gave me something I had never held before. Truth. And truth, once seen, refuses to stay quiet. For the first time in my life, I stopped explaining myself, because every explanation I had ever offered only gave others permission to reshape my truth into something smaller and easier to dismiss. I stood near the edge of the room as conversations continued around me, listening instead of reacting, allowing words to travel where my voice never had. An older cousin approached my mother during a pause between speeches, her tone light but sincere. "You must feel relieved," she said. "Monica carried so much for you over the years." My mother looked confused. "What do you mean?" "Well," my cousin continued, "she was always there, helping you late at night, handling things quietly when work overwhelmed you." I watched my sister's posture stiffen across the room. Another relative joined the conversation. "She practically lived here during your busiest years," he added. "I always admired that dedication." My sister interrupted quickly. "She chose that." I did not respond. Instead, I stayed still, letting the words move freely without my interference. A longtime family friend, Carol, spoke next. "I remember calling you during deadlines," she said to my mother. "Monica answered more often than you did." My mother frowned slightly. "I did not realize that was noticed." Carol smiled gently. "It was." Something shifted then, subtle but undeniable, as conversations began circling back to moments I had never named out loud. A former colleague of my mother's approached me directly. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "Your mother told us she relied on you more than anyone during her final years." I swallowed hard. "She never said that to me." He looked surprised. "She said it often." Across the room, my sister's smile grew tighter, her confidence thinning as the narrative no longer obeyed her direction. During another speech, an aunt raised her glass. "I want to acknowledge something," she said. "Behind every strong woman is someone who helps her stand when exhaustion sets in, and for years, that person was Monica." The room grew quiet. I felt my breath catch, not from pride, but from release. My sister shifted beside me. "This is getting unnecessary," she whispered sharply. I met her eyes calmly. "It is already happening." "You planned this," she accused. "I planned nothing," I replied. I stopped preventing truth from speaking. My mother looked at me then, really looked at me, as if seeing something she had grown used to overlooking. "Is this true?" she asked softly. "Yes," I replied. "But it was never meant to be currency." She pressed her lips together, processing something that could no longer be ignored. Later, during a quiet moment, she pulled me aside. "I did not know how much you gave up," she said. "I never asked you to," I replied. "I only hoped it mattered." She nodded slowly. "It always did. I just did not say it." That admission landed heavier than any apology could have. My sister approached us moments later, her voice strained. "This is turning into something it was not meant to be," she said. "It is turning into honesty," my mother replied gently, and for the first time, my sister did not interrupt. As conversations continued, more details surfaced without prompting. "I remember Monica canceling trips," someone said. "She was always available," another added. "She carried more than anyone realized," a third voice agreed. I did not correct, embellish, or clarify. I listened. And in listening, I felt power settle into my chest, quiet and steady. I no longer needed validation from the people who withheld it. I no longer needed to compete with narratives that never belonged to me. Truth was doing its work. During the final speech of the evening, my mother returned to the microphone, her voice trembling slightly. "There is something I need to say," she began. "I was supported in more ways than I ever acknowledged, and some of that support came from my daughter, Monica." My heart slowed. "I took her presence for granted," she continued. "And tonight, I see that clearly." Applause followed, but it sounded different now, heavier, more honest. I stood still, tears threatening but controlled, because this moment was not about victory. It was about recognition without demand. As the crowd dispersed, my sister remained silent, her control slipping quietly away, replaced by the discomfort of exposure. I realized then that standing still had done more than defending myself ever could. Truth did not need volume. It only needed space. And in that space, I finally understood that my worth did not require constant explanation, because it had been evident all along, waiting patiently for the moment I stopped hiding it. That realization changed everything, because I no longer needed to fight to exist. I simply allowed myself to be seen. The moment that finally changed everything did not arrive through confrontation or raised voices, but through a quiet conversation that could no longer be avoided once the truth had been spoken aloud. My mother found me near the edge of the room after most guests had begun leaving, her expression heavier than I had ever seen it before. "Monica," she said softly, "can we talk alone?" I nodded, because running was no longer necessary. We stepped into a quieter space, the noise of celebration fading behind us. "I did not realize," she began, pausing as if the words were difficult to form, "how much you carried for me." "I never wanted recognition," I replied carefully. "I wanted honesty." She nodded slowly. "I let someone else decide what mattered." My sister appeared moments later, her presence tense, her confidence stripped by exposure she could not undo. "You are turning this into something ugly," she said defensively. "No," my mother replied, her voice firmer than I expected. "I allowed it to become ugly by not paying attention." My sister looked stunned. "I was protecting you," she insisted. "You were controlling the story," my mother said. "And I believed it because it was convenient." I remained quiet, choosing presence over argument. My sister turned to me. "Why did you not say anything sooner?" "I did," I replied calmly. "You just did not listen." Her shoulders dropped slightly. "You could have defended yourself." "I spent years defending you instead," I said. The silence that followed felt final rather than uncomfortable. My mother reached for my hand, her grip uncertain. "I am sorry," she said. "Not because others noticed, but because I did not." That distinction mattered more than any apology spoken publicly. "I should have asked," she continued. "I should have looked closer." "Yes," I replied. "You should have." My sister exhaled sharply. "So what now?" "What happens next," my mother said, "is accountability." My sister looked away, realizing that control had slipped beyond recovery. In the days that followed, conversations shifted naturally, without my effort or demand. Relatives reached out, not to question me, but to acknowledge things they had assumed were already known. "I never realized how much you gave up," one said. "I always thought you preferred staying behind the scenes," another admitted. "You deserved recognition," a third added. I listened without resentment, because resentment was no longer necessary. My sister grew quieter, her version of events losing credibility as truth replaced assumption. She never apologized directly, but she stopped speaking for me, which felt like its own consequence. One evening, my mother visited my home for the first time in years. "I want to understand you better," she said. "I want to be seen without performing," I replied. She nodded. "I think I am ready for that." We talked late into the night, not about guilt or blame, but about reality, about the years we both lost by assuming silence meant strength. Before she left, she said something that stayed with me. "You were never invisible," she said. "I just was not looking." That acknowledgement healed something words had never reached. After everything settled, I sat alone, reflecting on how close I came to disappearing inside my own family, how easily quiet devotion became erasure when convenience outweighed care. I realized then that survival did not come from fighting harder or proving worth louder. Survival came from stepping back and allowing truth to occupy the space I once filled with silence. Being erased nearly broke me, not because I lacked strength, but because I offered it freely to people who never learned how to hold it responsibly. Truth restored what silence had taken, not through punishment, but through clarity. Standing in my own space, breathing evenly, grounded in understanding rather than pain, I spoke aloud to myself. "I belong without permission." That sentence carried peace. I did not need to be rewritten into someone else's version of acceptable. I did not need to compete for acknowledgement. I did not need to disappear to maintain harmony. Sometimes survival means allowing truth to walk in uninvited, because it always knows exactly where it belongs. And when it does, it stays. Please subscribe my channel for more interesting videos.